The small town of Willow Creek was known for its quiet streets, friendly neighbors, and picturesque landscapes. But on this particular day, the air felt heavy with grief. The entire community had gathered at the local cemetery to bid farewell to someone who had touched their lives in countless ways, Emily Carter. At just 16 years old, Emily had been a bright light in the town. She was kind, compassionate, and always willing to lend a helping hand. Whether it was volunteering at the animal shelter or cheering up a classmate having a bad day, Emily's presence brought warmth to everyone around her. Her untimely death in a car accident had left the town reeling. No one could believe that such a vibrant young soul was gone so suddenly. The funeral was a somber affair, with tears streaming down faces as family and friends shared memories of Emily. Her parents stood by her coffin, clutching each other tightly, unable to comprehend how they would ever move forward without their daughter. Friends sobbed openly, holding on to one another for support. Even strangers who barely knew Emily showed up to pay their respects, drawn by the stories of her kindness and generosity. Amidst all the mourners, there was one figure who stood out. Not because he spoke or drew attention to himself, but because of his quiet determination. That figure was Max, Emily's golden retriever. From the moment Emily's family arrived at the cemetery, Max had refused to leave her side. He sat close to the coffin, his head resting on his paws, his big brown eyes filled with sadness. It was almost as if he understood what was happening, as if he knew this was the last time he would see his best friend. Max had been with Emily since she was 10 years old. On her birthday that year, her parents surprised her with a tiny, scruffy puppy who wagged his tail furiously and licked her face until she laughed uncontrollably. From that day on, Max and Emily were inseparable. They went on long walks together, played fetch in the backyard, and curled up on the couch during lazy afternoons. Max wasn't just a pet. He was part of the family. And now, standing beside her coffin, it was clear that Max wasn't ready to let her go. As the service began, the pastor spoke heartfelt words about Emily's life, her dreams, and the legacy she left behind. People took turns sharing their favorite memories of her, some smiling through their tears, others breaking down entirely. Throughout it all, Max remained still, his gaze fixed on the coffin. When the pallbearers carefully lowered Emily's casket into the ground, Max whimpered softly, a sound so heart-wrenching that it made several people cry even harder. After the ceremony ended, the crowd slowly dispersed. Family members hugged one another tightly before heading home, while friends lingered briefly to offer condolences. But Max didn't move. He stayed right where he was, lying next to the freshly dug earth where Emily's coffin now rested. Emily's mother tried to coax him away, calling his name gently and offering him treats. "Come on, Max," she said, her voice trembling. "Let's go home." But Max only looked up at her with those sad, soulful eyes, and then turned back, to the grave. It was as if he was telling her, "I can't leave her." Days passed, and Max continued to stay by Emily's grave. Visitors to the cemetery noticed him there, rain or shine, day and night. Some brought him food and water, setting bowls near the headstone. Others stopped to pet him, marveling at his loyalty. Word spread quickly throughout Willow Creek about the dog who wouldn't abandon his owner, even in death. People came, not only to pay their respects to Emily, but also to see Max, whose devotion inspired awe and admiration. Despite the care offered by well-meaning visitors, Max grew thinner. His once shiny coat dulled, and his ribs began to show beneath his fur. Yet his spirit never wavered. Every morning, he returned to the same spot, lying patiently beside Emily's grave. Sometimes he closed his eyes, as if dreaming of happier times when Emily would throw a ball for him to chase. Other times he stared intently at the headstone, as though waiting for her to appear. The townspeople couldn't help but feel moved by Max's unwavering loyalty. Stories about him circulated widely, reaching even those who hadn't known Emily personally. One elderly woman, Mrs. Harper, visited the cemetery every afternoon just to sit with Max. She brought him blankets to keep him warm during chilly nights and whispered soothing words to him. "You're a good boy, Max," she told him one evening, stroking his fur. Emily must have loved you very much. But no matter how much love and care people showered on him, Max remained steadfast in his vigil. He seemed driven by something deeper than hunger or exhaustion, a bond so strong that nothing could break it. For Max, leaving Emily's side wasn't an option. As far as he was concerned, his job wasn't done yet. The sight of Max lying faithfully beside Emily's grave became a familiar one in Willow Creek. Every day, people passing through the cemetery would stop to check on him, bringing food, water, and blankets. Some even left toys near the headstone, hoping to bring a spark of joy to the grieving dog. But despite their efforts, Max showed no interest in playing or eating much. His focus remained solely on the patch of earth where Emily lay buried. It was as if he believed that by staying close, he could somehow keep her presence alive. One crisp afternoon, a group of bikers from the Iron Hawks Motorcycle Club rode past the cemetery on their way to a nearby diner. The rumble of their engines echoed through the quiet streets, drawing curious glances from pedestrians. As they approached the cemetery gates, something unusual caught their attention, a golden retriever lying motionless beside a grave. The dog looked worn and weary, his fur matted and dull, but there was an unmistakable determination in his posture. Intrigued, the leader of the group, Jake Bear Thompson, signaled for the others to slow down. Bear was a towering man with broad shoulders, a thick beard, and tattoos covering his arms. Despite his intimidating appearance, he had a soft spot for animals. He often joked that dogs were better judges of character than people, and he always made sure stray animals in town were fed and cared for. When he saw Max, something tugged at his heartstrings. Leaving his bike behind, Bear walked toward the dog, followed by a few members of the club. As Bear knelt beside Max, the dog raised his head slightly, his eyes meeting Bear's. There was no fear or aggression in Max's gaze, only a deep, unshakable sadness. Bear reached out slowly, offering a sandwich he'd been saving for later. "Hey there, buddy," he said softly. "You look like you could use this more than I can." Max sniffed the food but didn't eat it. Instead, he turned his head back toward the grave, as if reminding Bear why he was there. Bear glanced at the headstone and read the inscription, "Emily Carter, beloved daughter and friend." He frowned, recognizing the name. Everyone in Willow Creek knew about Emily's tragic death. What struck him most, however, was the dog's unwavering devotion. Most animals would have wandered off by now, seeking shelter or food. But not Max. Something about his behavior suggested that he wasn't just mourning, he was guarding something. "Looks like he ain't planning to leave anytime soon," muttered one of the bikers, a wiry man named Tony. "Poor guy must have really loved her." Bear nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah, but it ain't normal for a dog to stay like this for days. Something else is going on here." He stood up, brushing dirt off his jeans. "We should find out what happened to this girl. Maybe we can help." Over the next few days, the Ironhawks took it upon themselves to learn more about Emily and the circumstances surrounding her death. They started by visiting local businesses, asking questions, and piecing together fragments of information. The bikers weren't exactly known for being nosy. They usually kept to themselves. But something about Max's loyalty compelled them to dig deeper. Their investigation led them to the mechanic shop where Emily's car had been serviced weeks before. The accident. A young employee named Danny recognized the bikers immediately. He hesitated when they asked about Emily's car, glancing nervously over his shoulder before speaking. "I don't know if I should say anything," he admitted. "But yeah, I worked on her car, replaced the brakes and stuff. Everything seemed fine. Until what?" Bear pressed, his voice firm but calm. Danny sighed, running a hand through his hair. "A couple days after she picked it up, I heard rumors. People said the brakes failed while she was driving. That's how she crashed. But I swear I did everything right. I followed the manual step by step." Bear exchanged a glance with his fellow bikers. Something didn't add up. If Danny had done his job properly, why had the brakes failed? Determined to get answers, The Iron Hawks decided to inspect the mechanic shop themselves. Late that night, under the cover of darkness, they returned to the shop, searching for clues. Inside, they found tools scattered across workbenches and piles of paperwork stacked haphazardly on desks. One document caught Bear's eye, a receipt detailing repairs made to Emily's car. Scrawled in the margins were notes about brake lines being replaced, along with a signature belonging to someone named Victor Kane. Bear's jaw tightened as he recognized the name. Victor was the owner of the shop, a man with a reputation for cutting corners to save money. The discovery only fueled the bikers' determination to uncover the truth. They combed through every inch of the shop, looking for anything that might explain what had happened. In a dusty corner, they stumbled upon a toolbox containing a set of damaged brake components. The parts bore signs of tampering, scratches, and dents that suggested deliberate sabotage. Bear clenched his fists, anger bubbling inside him. "This ain't no accident," he growled. "Someone messed with her car on purpose." As the bikers continued their search, they noticed something else unusual, a trail of muddy footprints leading toward the back door. Following the prints, they discovered a hidden room filled with surveillance equipment. On one of the monitors, grainy footage played on a loop, showing Emily going about her daily routine. Bear felt a chill run down his spine. Someone had been watching her. Suddenly, a low growl interrupted their thoughts. Turning around, they saw Max standing in the doorway, his hackles raised. For the first time since they'd met him, the dog looked agitated, his eyes darting between the bikers and the surveillance setup. Bear crouched down, holding out a hand. "Easy, boy," he said gently. "We're trying to figure out what happened to your girl." Max hesitated for a moment before stepping closer. His nose twitched as he sniffed the air. Then he trotted over to a filing cabinet in the corner. Pawing at the drawer, he let out a soft whine. Bear opened it cautiously, revealing stacks of photographs and documents. Among them were pictures of Emily, taken without her knowledge, along with detailed notes about her schedule and habits. Bear's stomach churned as he realized the extent of the obsession. Whoever had been stalking Emily hadn't acted on impulse. They had planned her demise meticulously. And now, thanks to Max's instincts, the bikers had uncovered evidence that could expose the truth. Standing up, Bear looked at his companions. "We need to take this to the cops," he said. "But first, we gotta make sure Max stays safe. Whoever did this ain't gonna stop till they tie up loose ends." With newfound resolve, the Iron Hawks gathered the evidence and prepared to confront the dark secrets lurking beneath the surface of Willow Creek. Little did they know, Max's role in unraveling the mystery was far from over. The Iron Hawks knew they were onto something big, but they also understood the gravity of what they had uncovered. The evidence they found in the hidden room at the mechanic shop painted a chilling picture. Someone had been stalking Emily Carter for weeks, meticulously documenting her every move. The surveillance footage, the photographs, and the notes detailing her daily routine all pointed to one horrifying conclusion. Emily's death wasn't an accident. It was premeditated. Bear clenched his fists as he stared at the pile of documents, spread out on a table back at the clubhouse. The bikers had gathered there after leaving the mechanic shop, determined to piece together the puzzle. Tony sat nearby, flipping through the photos with a grim expression. "This guy was obsessed," he muttered, holding up a close-up shot of Emily walking her dog. "Look at this. He even followed her when she was just taking Max for a walk." Bear nodded, his jaw tightening. "Obsession turns dangerous real quick. Whoever this is, they didn't care who got hurt. They wanted Emily gone, and they made sure it happened." His voice carried a mix of anger and sadness, not just for Emily, but for Max too. The loyal dog had lost everything because of someone's twisted actions. As they sifted through the evidence, Bear noticed something odd about the brake components they'd found earlier. While some parts showed clear signs of tampering, others appeared almost new. Too new, in fact. "These pieces don't match," he said, pointing to the mismatched components. "Whoever messed with her car swapped out parts to make it look like regular wear and tear, but they didn't count on us digging deeper." The bikers agreed that the next step was to confront Victor Kane, the owner of the mechanic shop. If anyone knew what really happened to Emily's car, It would be him. But before heading straight to Victor, they decided to gather more information. Bear sent 2 members of the group, Mike and Riley, to talk to other employees at the shop, while he stayed behind to keep an eye on Max. The dog had become an unofficial member of their crew, sticking close to Bear ever since they'd discovered the stash of evidence. Mike and Riley returned later that evening with troubling news. According to Danny, the young mechanic who'd first spoken to them, Victor had a reputation for cutting corners and pressuring workers to use cheap or faulty parts. Danny says Victor's always looking for ways to save money, Mike reported. But apparently he's also got a temper. If anyone questions his decisions, they're fired on the spot. Riley chimed in, adding, "And get this. Victor's been acting weird lately. Ever since Emily's accident, he's been avoiding customers and making excuses to stay away from the shop. Danny thinks he's hiding something." Bear leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "Sounds like our guy's getting nervous. We need to act fast before he covers his tracks." That night, the Ironhawks devised a plan. They decided to pay Victor a visit at his home, hoping to catch him off guard. Armed with the evidence they'd collected, they rode out to a secluded house on the outskirts of Willow Creek. The property was surrounded by tall trees, giving it an eerie, isolated feel. As they approached the front door, Bear knocked firmly, his heart pounding with anticipation. After a few moments, the door creaked open, revealing Victor Kane. He was a wiry man with sunken eyes and a nervous demeanor. When he saw the bikers standing on his porch, his face went pale. "What do you want?" he stammered, glancing anxiously over his shoulder. "We've got some questions about Emily Carter's car," Bear said, his tone calm but firm. "Mind if we come in?" Victor hesitated, clearly uneasy, but eventually stepped aside to let them in. Inside, the house was cluttered and dimly lit, with stacks of papers and tools scattered across the living room. Bear wasted no time getting to the point. "We know you tampered with her brakes," he said, laying the damaged components on the coffee table. "And we know you've been watching her for weeks. So why don't you save us all some trouble and tell us what really happened?" For a moment, Victor looked like he might deny everything. But then his shoulders sagged, and he sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he whispered, his voice trembling. "It was supposed to be a scare, nothing more, just to make her leave me alone." Bear frowned, leaning forward. "Start from the beginning, Victor. What are you talking about?" Victor took a deep breath, his words spilling out in a shaky confession. "Emily came into the shop a few months ago for routine maintenance. She was friendly, always smiling, and I couldn't stop thinking about her. I started seeing her everywhere, in town, at the grocery store, even on my way home. It drove me crazy. I thought maybe if I fixed her car, she'd notice me. Maybe we could—" He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Bear exchanged a glance with the others, piecing together the rest. Victor's obsession had spiraled out of control, leading him to sabotage Emily's brakes in a desperate attempt to force her attention. But things had gone horribly wrong. "I swear I didn't want her to die," Victor insisted, tears streaming down his face. "I just wanted her to come back to the shop so I could fix the problem and play the hero. But when I heard about the accident—" His voice broke and he buried his face in his hands again. Bear stood up, disgust written all over his face. "You're coming with us," he said, grabbing Victor by the arm. "The cops will sort this out." As they led Victor outside, Max trotted alongside them, his tail wagging faintly. For the first time since Emily's death, the dog seemed to sense that justice was within reach. The Ironhawks loaded Victor into one of their trucks and headed straight for the police station, where they handed over the evidence and recounted everything they'd discovered. The authorities acted swiftly, arresting Victor and charging him with manslaughter. News of the arrest spread quickly through Willow Creek, shocking the community. No one had suspected that Emily's death was anything but a tragic accident. Her parents were devastated, but grateful to finally have answers. "Thank you," Emily's mother told Bear, tears streaming down her face. "You gave us closure. And Max? He never gave up." Max, meanwhile, continued to visit Emily's grave, though his demeanor began to change. With the truth exposed, and justice served, he seemed to find a small measure of peace. The Ironhawks adopted him officially, ensuring he had a loving home and plenty of care. But even as he settled into his new life, Max never forgot Emily. On quiet evenings, he could often be seen gazing at the stars, his tail wagging softly, as if sensing her presence watching over him. For Bear and the rest of the Ironhawks, Max's story became a reminder of the power of loyalty and the importance of seeking justice no matter how daunting the task. And for the people of Willow Creek, Max's unwavering devotion inspired hope, a testament to the enduring bond between humans and animals and the lengths they'll go to protect the ones they love. With Victor Kane behind bars and the truth about Emily's death finally exposed, the town of Willow Creek began to heal. The Ironhawks had played a pivotal role in uncovering the sinister plot that led to her tragic end, but their work wasn't done yet. Max, the golden retriever who had refused to leave Emily's grave, remained at the center of everything. His unwavering loyalty had not only inspired those around him, but also seemed to guide them toward the answers they needed. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, Bear sat on the steps of the clubhouse with Max lying quietly beside him. The dog no longer looked as frail as he had days earlier. Thanks to the care and attention from the bikers, his coat was starting to regain its shine, and his ribs were less visible. Yet despite these improvements, Max still carried an air of quiet sadness. Bear scratched behind his ears absent-mindedly, lost in thought. "Max," Bear said softly, almost to himself, "you've been through hell, haven't you, boy? But you're stronger than anyone gives you credit for." As if responding to Bear's words, Max lifted his head and let out a soft whine before standing up and trotting toward the edge of the property. He paused there, looking back at Bear expectantly. Bear raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the dog's sudden movement. "What is it, buddy? You want to show me something?" Curiosity piqued, Bear grabbed his leather jacket and followed Max. The dog moved with purpose, weaving through the streets of Willow Creek until he reached the cemetery. Bear walked alongside him, watching as Max made a beeline for Emily's grave. But instead of lying down as he usually did, Max circled the headstone once and then turned away, heading deeper into the cemetery. Bear frowned, unsure of what to make of this change in behavior. "Where are you going, Max?" he asked, jogging slightly to keep up. Max didn't hesitate or look back. He continued moving, his nose occasionally brushing against the ground as if following a scent trail. Bear noticed that Max seemed to know exactly where he was going, navigating the winding paths of the cemetery with ease. After several minutes, Max stopped near an old oak tree at the far corner of the cemetery. Beneath the tree stood a weathered bench, half hidden by overgrown grass and fallen leaves. Bear knelt down beside Max, running a hand over the rough surface of the bench. There was nothing particularly remarkable about it, just an ordinary wooden seat. But something about the way Max stared at it made Bear feel like there was more to the story. "Did Emily come here often?" Bear murmured, glancing at Max. The dog wagged his tail faintly, confirming Bear's suspicion. Bear sat down on the bench, letting his eyes wander across the cemetery. From this spot, he could see Emily's grave clearly. It dawned on him that this might have been one of her favorite places, a quiet retreat where she could sit and reflect. But Max wasn't done leading Bear yet. After a few moments, the dog nudged Bear's leg gently, urging him to get up. Reluctantly, Bear rose to his feet and followed Max once again. This time, the dog led him out of the cemetery entirely, crossing the street and heading toward an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The building was dilapidated, its windows boarded up and its walls covered in graffiti. Bear hesitated, wondering why Max would bring him here. "Max, what are we doing?" Bear asked cautiously, scanning the area for any signs of danger. Max ignored him, trotting confidently toward the entrance of the warehouse. Bear sighed and pulled out his phone, texting the rest of the Ironhawks to meet him there. Whatever Max was trying to show him, it was clear that the dog believed it was important. When the other bikers arrived, they found Bear and Max standing inside the warehouse, surrounded by piles of discarded tools, rusted machinery, and broken furniture. The air smelled musty, and the floor was littered with debris. Tony wrinkled his nose as he stepped inside. "What's this place?" he asked, kicking aside a piece of scrap metal. "I don't know," Bear admitted, "but Max brought us here. Look." He pointed to a section of the floor where Max was pawing insistently at a loose plank of wood. Riley crouched down and examined it closely, noticing that the wood appeared newer than the rest of the flooring. "There's something under here," Riley said, prying the plank loose with a crowbar. Beneath the floorboards, they discovered a small metal box. Bear opened it carefully, revealing a collection of personal items: a necklace, a journal, and a stack of handwritten letters. As Bear flipped through the pages of the journal, his expression darkened. The entries were written in Victor Kane's handwriting, detailing his growing obsession with Emily. One passage described how he had followed her to the cemetery, watching her sit on the bench beneath the oak tree. Another entry outlined his plan to sabotage her car, claiming it was the only way to make her notice him. "This is it," Bear said grimly, holding up the journal. "This proves everything. Victor wasn't just obsessed, he was dangerous, and Max knew all along." The bikers exchanged stunned looks, realizing the significance of what they had found. Max hadn't simply been mourning Emily's loss. He had been trying to lead them to evidence that could expose the truth. His instincts, honed by years of loyalty and companionship, had guided him to the very place where Victor had hidden his darkest secrets. That night, the Iron Hawks returned to the police station, delivering the metal box and its contents to the authorities. The additional evidence strengthened the case against Victor, leaving no room for doubt about his guilt. As news of the discovery spread, the townspeople marveled at Max's role in solving the mystery. Some joked that he was the real detective, while others viewed him as a guardian angel sent to protect Emily's memory. For Bear, the experience reinforced his belief in the intelligence and intuition of animals. Max had shown them that loyalty wasn't just about staying by someone's side. It was about fighting for justice, even when the odds seemed impossible. And for Max, the journey had given him a renewed sense of purpose. Though he still visited Emily's grave regularly, he now spent most of his time with the Iron Hawks, forming new bonds and finding joy in unexpected places. Late one night, as Bear sat on the clubhouse steps with Max curled up at his feet, he looked up at the stars and smiled. "You're something else, Max," he said quietly. "Emily picked a good partner when she chose you." Max lifted his head briefly, his tail thumping against the ground, before resting his chin on his paws once more. In that moment, Bear felt certain that Emily's spirit lived on, not just in the memories of those who loved her, but in the heart of the loyal dog who had never stopped believing in her. The discovery of Victor Kane's hidden journal and the personal belongings he had stashed in the abandoned warehouse sent shockwaves through Willow Creek. The Iron Hawks, who had already become local heroes for their role in exposing Emily's tragic fate, were now hailed as saviors by the community. But for Bear and his fellow bikers, the true hero remained Max, the golden retriever whose instincts had led them to the final piece of evidence needed to bring Victor to justice. Victor's trial was swift and decisive. The overwhelming amount of evidence against him left little room for doubt. His own journal entries painted a damning picture of obsession spiraling into violence, while the surveillance equipment and tampered brake components sealed his guilt beyond question. In court, Emily's parents delivered emotional testimonies recounting how their daughter's death had shattered their lives. When the judge announced the verdict, guilty on all charges, a collective sigh of relief swept through the courtroom. Justice had finally been served. For the people of Willow Creek, the conviction brought a measure of closure. They could begin to heal from the tragedy that had shaken their small town. Yet for Max, the outcome seemed almost bittersweet. While he no longer lingered at Emily's grave with the same intensity, there was still a quiet sadness in his eyes. He carried the weight of loss in a way that words could never fully capture. Bear noticed this shift in Max's demeanor and made it his mission to ensure the dog found happiness again. "You've done your part, buddy," Bear often told him, ruffling the fur on his head. "Now it's time for you to live a little." True to his word, Bear and the Iron Hawks went out of their way to make Max feel like one of their own. They took him on rides through the countryside, where the wind whipped through his fur and the sun warmed his back. They introduced him to other dogs in the area, organizing playful meetups that reminded Max what it felt like to run free without worry. Slowly but surely, Max began to rediscover joy. One Saturday afternoon, the Ironhawks decided to host a barbecue at the clubhouse to celebrate Max officially becoming part of their family. The event drew a crowd, not just the bikers themselves, but also townsfolk who wanted to thank the group for their bravery. Music played softly in the background, burgers sizzled on the grill, and laughter filled the air. Max wandered among the guests, wagging his tail and accepting pats on the head from everyone he passed. For the first time in weeks, he looked truly content. As the day wore on, Bear stood near the fire pit, watching Max interact with the crowd. A young girl, no older than 6, approached the dog hesitantly, holding out a squeaky toy. "Can I play with him?" she asked shyly, looking up at Bear for permission. Bear smiled warmly. "Of course, sweetheart. Max loves kids." The girl giggled as Max gently took the toy from her hand and dropped it at her feet, inviting her to throw it. She obliged, tossing the toy across the yard, and Max bounded after it with surprising energy. The sight brought smiles to everyone's faces, including Emily's parents, who stood nearby watching the scene unfold. "He's so good with children," Emily's mother remarked, her voice tinged with both sadness and pride. Emily always said Max would have made an amazing therapy dog. That comment sparked an idea in Bear's mind. After the party ended and the guests had gone home, he sat down with the rest of the Ironhawks to discuss it. "What if we trained Max to be a therapy dog?" he suggested. "He's got such a gentle nature, and he connects with people in a way most animals don't, plus it'd give him a new purpose, a way to honor Emily's memory." The bikers loved the idea. They knew Max had already touched countless lives simply by being himself, but training him to help others could amplify his impact exponentially. The next day, they reached out to a local animal trainer who specialized in preparing dogs for therapy work. To their delight, the trainer agreed to take Max under her wing free of charge, citing his extraordinary story as inspiration. Training sessions began shortly thereafter, and Max proved to be a natural. He learned commands quickly, adapted well to new environments, and displayed an uncanny ability to sense when someone needed comfort. Whether it was sitting patiently beside a grieving widow or nudging a shy child to encourage interaction, Max excelled at providing emotional support. The trainer marveled at his progress, calling him a once-in-a-lifetime dog. Meanwhile, Bear and the Ironhawks continued to care for Max, ensuring he had plenty of downtime between training sessions. They took him on adventures, explored new trails, and even taught him tricks to keep his mind sharp. Max thrived under their guidance, growing stronger and happier with each passing day. Still, he never forgot Emily. On quiet nights when the world grew still and the stars twinkled overhead, Max could often be found gazing toward the cemetery, as if silently thanking her for giving him a life worth living. Months later, Max graduated from his therapy training and officially became a certified therapy dog. The Ironhawks threw another celebration to mark the occasion, complete with balloons, cake, and a custom vest embroidered with Max's name. Dressed in his new gear, Max strutted around the clubhouse like a proud graduate, soaking up the admiration of his human companions. His first assignment came soon after, a visit to a nursing home in a neighboring town. As Max walked through the facility, residents lit up with excitement, eager to meet the golden retriever who had captured the hearts of so many. One elderly man, confined to a wheelchair and rarely speaking, reached out to pet Max, tears streaming down his face. "I haven't smiled like this in years," he whispered, clutching Max's paw tightly. Moments like these reaffirmed why Bear and the Ironhawks had pursued therapy work for Max. It wasn't just about helping others, it was about honoring Emily's legacy of kindness. Word of Max's visit spread quickly, and requests poured in from schools, hospitals, and community centers. Everywhere he went, Max left a trail of smiles and warm memories. People began referring to him as the miracle dog, crediting him not only with solving Emily's case but also with bringing hope to those who needed it most. For Bear, seeing Max thrive in this new role was deeply fulfilling. It reminded him that even in the darkest times, light could emerge, and sometimes That light came in the form of a loyal, four-legged friend. Yet despite his newfound fame, Max remained humble, always ready to offer a wagging tail or a comforting nuzzle. He didn't seek recognition or praise. He simply did what came naturally to him, loving unconditionally and reminding everyone around him of the power of connection. And though Emily was no longer physically present, her spirit lived on through Max, inspiring acts of compassion and resilience wherever he went. Late one evening, as Bear sat on the clubhouse steps with Max lying peacefully beside him, he looked up at the stars and smiled. "You're making her proud, buddy," he said softly. Max let out a contented sigh, resting his head on Bear's boot. Together, they sat in comfortable silence, two unlikely friends bound by loyalty, love, and the enduring belief that even in loss there is always room for healing. Months had passed since Max's transformation from a grieving dog into a beloved therapy companion, and his impact on the community of Willow Creek and beyond was nothing short of extraordinary. The golden retriever, who once refused to leave, Emily's grave, now spent his days spreading joy and comfort to those in need. His story had become a beacon of hope, a testament to the resilience of love and loyalty, even in the face of unimaginable loss. Bear often reflected on how far Max had come. On quiet mornings, as he sipped coffee on the clubhouse steps with Max lying beside him, he couldn't help but marvel at the dog's journey. "You've changed so many lives, buddy," Bear would say, scratching behind Max's ears. "But I reckon you've changed mine the most." Max would respond with a soft thump of his tail against the wooden planks, as if agreeing wholeheartedly. Max's reputation grew steadily, and soon people from neighboring towns began requesting visits. Schools invited him to classrooms where children struggling with anxiety or grief found solace in his presence. Hospitals welcomed him into sterile hallways, where patients gripped his fur tightly, drawing strength from his calm demeanor. Even emergency responders sought his help during debriefings after traumatic incidents, finding comfort in his unwavering support. Wherever Max went, he left behind warmth and smiles, bridging gaps between strangers and reminding them of the simple power of kindness. One particularly memorable visit took place at a local elementary school. A young boy named Liam, who rarely spoke due to severe social anxiety, sat alone in the corner of the classroom, clutching a stuffed animal tightly to his chest. When Max entered the room, wagging his tail enthusiastically, Liam hesitated, at first unsure of what to do. But Max didn't rush him. Instead, he lay down a few feet away, patiently waiting. After several minutes, Liam crawled forward cautiously, reaching out a trembling hand to touch Max's fur. To everyone's surprise, Liam whispered, "Hi, doggy." Breaking weeks of silence, his teacher gasped, tears welling up in her eyes, as Liam continued to stroke Max's head. By the end of the session, Liam was smiling, a rare sight that brought cheers from his classmates and staff alike. That moment became one of countless stories shared about Max's ability to connect with people when words failed. As Max's fame spread, the Iron Hawks embraced their role as his guardians and advocates. They organized fundraisers to support therapy programs for animals like Max, ensuring that other dogs could receive training to make a difference in their communities. Merchandise featuring Max's image, t-shirts, mugs, and even plush toys, became popular items, with proceeds going toward animal shelters and rescue organizations. The bikers joked that they'd gone from being tough guys on motorcycles to running what felt like a nonprofit charity, but none of them minded. Seeing Max bring happiness to others made every effort worthwhile. In Willow Creek itself, the town decided to honor both Max and Emily in a permanent way. With donations pouring in from residents and visitors alike, they commissioned a statue to be placed near the cemetery entrance. It depicted Emily sitting on a bench beneath an oak tree, her arm draped lovingly over Max's back. Inscribed at the base were the words, "Forever faithful, forever loved." On the day of its unveiling, hundreds gathered to pay tribute, including Emily's parents, who expressed their gratitude for keeping her memory alive through Max's work. For Bear, the statue symbolized more than just remembrance. It represented the enduring bond between humans and animals, a connection capable of transcending even death. He stood beside Max during the ceremony, watching as people laid flowers and handwritten notes at the base of the monument. Some wrote messages of thanks, while others shared stories of how Max had touched their lives. One note read, simply, "Thank you for showing us that love never dies." Despite his busy schedule, Max continued to visit Emily's grave regularly. These trips were no longer marked by sorrow, but rather by quiet reflection. Bear noticed that Max seemed to carry himself differently now, his steps lighter, his gaze softer. It was as though he understood that Emily's spirit lived on, not only in the memories of those who loved her, but also in the countless lives he touched every day. On one such evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, Bear accompanied Max to the cemetery. Together they sat on the grass beside Emily's headstone, listening to the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Bear glanced down at Max, whose eyes were closed as he leaned against Bear's leg. "You know, buddy," Bear said softly, "Emily picked a hell of a partner when she chose you. She must have known you'd keep fighting for her even when things got tough." Max opened his eyes briefly, giving Bear a look that seemed almost knowing before resting his head on his paws again. In that moment, Bear felt certain that Emily was watching over them. Not just Max, but all of them. Her kindness had sparked a chain reaction, inspiring acts of compassion that rippled outward, touching lives far beyond what anyone could have imagined. The legacy of Emily and Max wasn't confined to Willow Creek. Their story traveled across states, shared in news articles, social media posts, and heartfelt conversations. People drew inspiration from Max's unwavering loyalty and the way he transformed his grief into purpose. Animal shelters reported an increase in adoptions, with families citing Max's story as motivation to give a second chance to dogs in need. Teachers used his tale in classrooms to teach lessons about empathy, perseverance, and the importance of standing up for justice. Even within the Iron Hawks, Max's influence reshaped the group's identity. Once seen as rough and tumble outsiders, they were now respected pillars of the community. Their commitment to helping Max fulfill his mission had softened their edges, proving that toughness and tenderness weren't mutually exclusive. Bear often joked that Max had turned them into softies, but deep down he knew it was true, and he was proud of it. As time went on, Max grew older, his golden coat streaked with gray and his movements slower than before. Yet his spirit remained as vibrant as ever. He continued his therapy work until age finally caught up with him, retiring gracefully to spend his remaining days surrounded by the love of the Iron Hawks. On lazy afternoons, he could be found lounging in the clubhouse courtyard, basking in the sunshine while Bear told stories of their adventures to anyone who would listen. When Max eventually passed away, the entire town mourned his loss. But there was no sadness in the hearts of those who had known him. Instead, there was gratitude for the laughter he brought, the hearts he healed, and the reminder that love endures long after we're gone. His ashes were scattered near Emily's grave, uniting the two friends forever. Today, visitors to Willow Creek still stop by the statue of Emily and Max, leaving flowers or sharing quiet moments of reflection. Children run their fingers over the bronze figures, imagining the bond that inspired so many. And somewhere, in the rustling of leaves or the wag of a tail, the spirit of Max lives on. A loyal guardian, a faithful friend, and a shining example of the power of love to change the world.